It's time to do a few changes on the car. So I've just got back from Victoria and there was a couple of things that didn't quite work, and so I want to change them. When I stopped at Ultimate 9, I got a bigger light bar, and I also got 2 unpainted little brackets from them so that I could cut them and weld them onto the headboard of my tray. So that's going to go on the cab guard of my tray, essentially shine over the roof, because I don't like having roof racks. The other thing is, Victoria is a big place. Going from place to place, I had my tyres down on the property at King Chrome. I had to pump them back up. I had my tyres let down to go wheeling with Kissler. I had to pump them back up. And then when we went to the Victorian High Country, I had to pump them back up again. So the compressor that I've got in there, it's a Viair 450C, which is one of the only options I had at the time, and I needed a 24-volt compressor. I did buy this from ARB. This is their twin compressor on 24 volt, and they are just a lot quicker for pumping up tires. It does take a long time to pump up those big tires. This is essentially going to be just for tires, and it will be a redundancy if something happens to that compressor. With the red winch, it relies on air to function, and so at the moment, if I had total air failure, I would not have a winch, I would not have lockers. I'm thinking I'll probably mount it underneath the driver's seat. I'm gonna have a bit of a think about it, a bit of a look at it, and then we'll get into it. I wasn't really going to use this wiring loom, but it's starting to look like that might be easiest. Before I go any further, I might decide how I'm going to wire this up and where it's going to go. As much as it appeals to me just to pull this all apart and run it raw just from these power cables here, it would make a lot more sense to maybe use this stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna have a bit of a think about it. We'll have a bit of a look. Okay, so I think it's gonna go under my seat, and I think I am going to put this in first, have that going from under my seat to air up. This here will go to my current air system. This has a check valve, so the compressor will stop once it reaches the pressure switch in this. It'll be a closed system until you plug this in, and then it'll fire up to pump my tyres up. Alright, so the first thing I realised was that it was going to be really hard to mount it to the bottom side of the seat, and so I started stenciling it up, and then this is going to stick out from under the seat that I plug my air fitting into. And then I realised that underneath here, it's actually got rib nuts. I can't exactly get a bolt from this side through that and into this, so I actually need to make a plate first. We've got this stencil here, and so I'm going to make an adapter plate using that stencil. So we'll start that. So I've already drilled and countersunk these holes, and then I've just got a foot on the end that is tapered so that I can still mount these into the floor. And so that's going to mount to the seat rib, and they're going to be rib nutted. We'll TIG this up and get it mounted. So yeah, I don't claim to be the best alley welder, but I've got the job done. But yeah, so that's going to mount like that, and the compressor's going to mount on top. We'll get it in the car. Alright, so it's the next day. Last night I did get the compressor mounted, but it got quite dark and hard to film, and so I'll show you what that looks like now. The only thing we need to do today is run the mains to the 24 volt junction box. So this compressor is going to run off 24 volt. The switching is still 12 volt because it's got a 12 volt relay in it. And so yeah, the mains is going to go into my 24 volt box, but the switching is going to come from behind the dash with the car's 12 volt wiring. Now you don't actually have to run a switch for this if you don't want to, because it's got its own pressure switch. When that manifold fills up with air, the compressor will turn off anyway. But I didn't want to get into a situation where, you know, I was at camp one night and you hear the compressor cycling through the night. Because yeah, if you do have a tiny little air leak, then it might cycle, you know, once every 4 hours or once every 2 hours or whatever the case may be. So yeah, it is a bit rainy and crappy today, so I might bring the car in here and we'll start doing some wiring. And so there's the compressor mounted there. It's just like that alley bracket that I tigged up last night. So that's all good. That's really sturdy. They're the main cables. They're gonna go under the floor here and then up into this box. And so that's gonna be the power supply for it. And then I just put a little Deutsch connector here, and that's gonna run 2 wires up behind the dash and have a switch just there in that blank. We'll crack this open and give it some power. All right, I've had trouble with this before where it's like really hard to film in this car, especially in this shed. Like I just don't have enough room. Yeah, so the basic gist is, because it's a twin compressor, they bundle up the 2 powers for the 2 motors, and then this is just an earth for the lot. For inside stuff, I tend to use the like the cloth tape. I just like the way the cloth tape looks when it's not going to see water or anything. So that's them done, and then we'll heat shrink them and get it connected. This is a bit hard to explain, but the good thing about running 24 volt for your touring setup like this, because you're doubling the voltage, you're halving the amps. And so for example, this ARB compressor at 12 volt, it might draw a peak of 60 amps, and so you need big wire for that 60 amps, you need big fuses, you need, you know, big everything. But when you run it at 24 volt, it's only running 30 amps, and so the wiring can be half the size, the fusing can be half the size. Sometimes you don't even need to run a relay because the amps are so low. And so yeah, that's one of the massive benefits of doing this. But yeah, we'll tighten this up and get this box closed up. One thing I will say is 24 volt makes a hell of a pop when you short a spanner out. Do you even work on cars though if your 13mm spanner doesn't have a massive burn mark in it? The box is all back in. Now you can see the power runs here under the carpet and then over up to there. Now the only other thing we've got to add is this switch. I'm just going to make like a Deutsch plug wire that goes from there under the center console up to the front and over to that spot there. I might actually move the car back out into the sun. I think the rain's pretty much stopped now and it'll be a lot nicer to work out there than in here. We've got 2 wires that we need to get up to here to the switch. I should be able to feed it in under the vinyl where the other one went, and I'll just take the gear sticks around out. Obviously I'm freshly back from Victoria, but that trip is coming next week. So if you're keen to see that, make sure you tune in. It was a wicked episode. We went to the King Chrome event and then I went wheeling with Dan on a property near his place, and then went to the Victorian High Country with Richard, Mac, TJ and Pooley and Jono. So yeah, tune in for that if you're keen for that. But anyway, let's keep moving. So all we're doing essentially is giving those two wires there 12 volt, which is going to action the relay to give the compressor 24 volt. And that's how it works. It might seem a bit confusing that it's switched with 12 but it's supplied by 24, but so you give the relay 12 volt and it supplies 24 to the compressor. That's put simply. So yeah, the amps that I need up here are only very low because they're only switching a relay. I'm not actually drawing anything from it, so I can just tap into pretty much anything. I was just going to tap into the back of the clock or the back of this volt gauge. All right, well that's that. That's all wired in now. I just gave it a quick test and it worked, so yeah, I'll give you a look at it. That is all mounted in there. The wiring's all done, so I'll flick this switch. And so you can hear the fan going as soon as you plug this into a tyre. Alright, so I kind of just bit the bullet and set something up that I've been meaning to set up for a while. So I've just added this piece here. So it's like 8 or 10 mil hard line, which comes around under the floor and then it goes into my other manifold. Now in this manifold here, I've got Winch air brake, both lockers, Winch free spool, and then the pressure switch for this whole system. And I used to have this Nitto fitting here down in the bottom, and that used to air up my tyres. The problem is this compressor's not very quick, and so it used to take ages. So now I added this compressor, and that system is all hooked in together so that if this compressor fails, I can run my lockers and everything off this one. So at the moment you'll hear this compressor cycle, so that's that compressor cycling. And now if something happens to that compressor, then I can add this one to the mix. You just turn that on there. And now this compressor is running everything. And so then when I want to pump up tyres, plug that into there, turn on both compressors, then hook it up to a tyre. And so that's both compressors running to air up the tyre. Airing up with both is a little bit of overkill, but it's going to be quick and I hate waiting to pump up tyres, so it's going to be good. Having that redundancy, if anything was to ever happen to that compressor, that's really important, especially with a red winch, because with total air failure, you do not have a winch at all. But yeah, so that's one job down. I'm just going to have a massive tidy up. Yeah, I'll see how much daylight I got left. Hopefully we've got enough time to do the light bar up there. The next job is getting this light bar onto the cab guard. I'm going to stencil 40 NB onto this in the same spot, and then I'm going to cut it and flappy it out with a flappy wheel. So yeah, I'll get a piece of 40 NB, trace it onto these, and then we'll cut them out, and I'll weld those on like that. Now it's just a matter of getting them in there in the same spot, like as in facing the same way, sitting it up on top, getting rid of a bit of paint off the tray, and then doing a fillet weld. clean those up and give them a touch up with some paint. So there's one, and the other side, and then we'll touch these up and we'll get the light bar on there. I don't know that there's much point filming the installation of the wiring loom. If you use one of these looms, it's just one clip into your high beams, positive, negative, switch into the cab, and then a cable to the light bar. I'm probably not going to use the loom though, to be honest. I've already got a light bar on the front, which means I'm already tapped into the high beams, and I want those two light bars to turn on with the same switch, and so it makes the most sense to piggyback off this relay and then just run a new supply so that you don't melt fuses. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, I think I'm going to call it there. If you're keen for the Victoria episode, it is really, really awesome. Please tune into that. That'll be coming up either this weekend or the weekend after, depending on when I get the extra footage that I'm waiting on. But yeah, thanks heaps for watching, and I'll see you guys soon. So yeah, it's still the first night, and they brought us down to the racetrack to give all the creators a go in the cars. And I honestly think this is King Chrome's way of saying, you know, you think your car can go off-road, you think your car goes fast, you know, you think your car handles well, check this out. Like, that's seriously what I think the goal is, and it's working, because that's the single sickest thing I've ever done, I think.